Detroit, Michigan. Oh, yeah. Detroit, Michigan. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Detroit, Michigan. Yeah, yeah. Hey, hey, hey. You heard about Marvin Gaye? We got him. Can I get a witness? Talking about hits there, USA. We got it. We got those fine, fine super supremes. The kind of girls you see in your dreams. When you hear a thundering sound, you know it comes from Detroit town. Talking about Rosa Parks, we said her. Talking about Henry Ford, the inventor. Talking about Aretha, yeah. We got her. Queen of soul. Bob Seger, yeah. We got him. In that old time rock and roll. Slim Shady set the world on fire. The big three, baby, and the finest cars. And George Clinton's Pete Funk All Stars. We spend our days on the line and our nights in the bars. Yeah. Detroit, Michigan. Yeah, yeah, 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 yeah. Detroit, Michigan. Oh, yeah. Detroit, Michigan. Hey, hey, hey. Detroit, Michigan. Oh, I love Detroit, Michigan. I love Detroit, Michigan. Oh, yeah. Detroit, Michigan. Detroit, Michigan.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to a very special edition of the Detroit Show. So we're going to continue to go into the 1980s, the probably best group of years. But today is exceptional because it is 313 Day, also known as Detroit Day. So it is March 13th, so it is 313 Day. So it's kind of our local holiday to celebrate the great city of Detroit. And we'll watch something from CBS Detroit to kind of explain a little bit. What's up, Dance? How you doing, buddy? Linda, hello. Digger, hello. So it's an important day for us. There's a ton of stuff that goes on around the city and all kinds of stuff. So we'll start with a clip to commemorate the day and kind of tell you a little bit more about what it's about. So
let the fun begin. Today is 313 Day, Detroit's own holiday.
CBS Detroit's Lauren Winfrey and Kiana Coleman sat down with some of the city's most influential figures to commemorate this day.
Detroit has always been the innovators. We've always been the ones where we don't duplicate anyone's style. We just kind of go with our own flow.
The Cartiers and the furs and the gaiters and the hairstyles and the...
That's what Detroit gives us.
Real raw. Detroit is a mentality.
Always been gritty and kind of grimy.
It's in their DNA.
Motown? What?
Right.
We are the impact.
One of my proudest achievements in my life, because Motown, we broke down so many barriers.
They don't know the history that Detroit have from B12, Eminem, Big Sean.
Hey, Detroit in this, yeah.
I am Detroit. Like, I can't even say in just what one way or what ways Detroit shaped me, because I am just Detroit. You know, it just all comes from my hometown.
It's my home. It's what made me a man, and it's embedded. I feel like everyone from Detroit just got that. It's in their DNA. We prideful. we wear D hats everywhere we go, or like, you know, it's always like something that we take with us from the city, no matter what part of the world we in.
Detroit shaped my sound. It just real raw. I'm inspired by my surroundings, people I listen to.
Jay Dilla, Slum Village.
That's what Detroit gives us. We grew up and it wasn't a nice guy path when it came to that, because it was about the grit of Detroit and just growing up in the streets.
My biggest inspiration was always here. Detroit shaped my sound as an artist just by exposing me to the things that exposed me to. You know, just off growing up, all the things I seen, the other rappers, what I was hearing them rap about, how I was hearing them rap, the beats, you feel me? Just everything in general, just our whole culture was inspiration in itself.
The diversity in everybody, you know.
I feel like we were respected. Like,
Detroit is Detroit, man.
a lot of people get their style from us.
Detroit alone, we getting our flowers.
So yeah, that's from some of the musicians and artists that call Detroit home. Detroit is, like I've said many times, best city in the world. It is a very important city to culture and history. And today's the day to celebrate that. So excited to share 313 Day. The reason it's called 313 Day is because so the first three numbers in a phone number are 313. So if it's 313, blah 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 blah. So that's how we got 313 Day, and then obviously March 13th is 313. So that's basically how it breaks down. With that being said, we're going to continue with our regular schedule. Look, and we're going to go into the 1980s. Some of the things that happened in the 1980s. A pretty significant plane crash with a surprising result. Major speech from a politician, and a couple other things that we'll get into starting right now. So I can't believe I missed this on the last one. So we're going to take a step back 1 year. And I gave it 2 clips because I think it deserves it. But I thought the Joe was built in 81, and that was my problem. That was my mistake. The Joe Louis Arena was not built in 1981. It was built in 1978, opened in 1979. So I was 1 year off on the Joe Louis Arena. So, yeah, I'm going to get to him. I was going to do a bunch of stuff with him during the Kobo. Some of the influence of Kobo. So I'm definitely gonna talk about it for sure. Huh. That's awesome. So the Joe Louis Arena, the arena of if I can talk, hosted its first event on December 12th, 1979, a college basketball game between University of Michigan and the University of Detroit. The Red Wings played their first game in the Joe on December 27th, 1979. The Joe Louis Arena is where the Red Wings really became notable, Detroit Red Wings hockey team. And it's really where everything kind of started. It's where they won a couple Stanley Cups and were really a dominant team at their time in the Joe. And one of the things that we're going to start with is a video of what it's like to, I believe this is a playoff game, but what it's kind of like to be at the Joe during this time, because it was an incredible experience to take part in when the Red Wings are in the playoffs, or so on and so forth. So we're going to start with a clip of that and kind of the hometown song. So
You took the midnight train going anywhere. Just a city boy, born and raised in South Detroit. You took the midnight train going anywhere.
It's such a cool. It was a really cool environment to be a part of. I can say that much. Gone to plenty of games and stuff there. It was really a lot of fun. So I don't want to get super copy claimed. Good band. But Dave Landau, a comedian also from Detroit, says it's a kind of a shit anthem to have because the first line of it is took the midnight train going anywhere. So born and raised in South Detroit, but would go anywhere to get away from the city. Obviously a joke, but yeah, it's kind of a funny aside to the conversation. Joe Louis has been replaced by Little Caesars Arena. On 6/17/19, it was demolished. Yeah, a song in the city north of Detroit about an area in Detroit that doesn't exist, but great song. Yeah, so South Detroit is Windsor. For those who don't know, Windsor, Ontario. So it doesn't technically exist in Detroit, but it's South Detroit, quote unquote. So that's kind of an idea of the atmosphere. This is so it's demolished on 6/17/19 and replaced by Little Caesars Arena. So this is the unfortunate end to what was a great house of hockey. So. Yep, we just started. So that is what is left of the Joe. So, great stadium. Kind of unceremonious what happened to it at the end. It so let's be honest, it was ugly as sin. It was on the river. The Detroit People Mover, which we'll learn about later in today's episode, it took you right to the Joe. One of the only places that it actually took you. But it did take you right to the Joe. And just so many memories and so much history in that building. Like the building itself kind of sucked. The history and what it stood for and what it represented did not. And it was sad to see it go. And it went kind of in a pretty terrible way. So, but things move on, and then you get news. So, it happens. Just wish it could have been a little bit different, but like I said, it happens. So, so that is the Joe Louis Arena, where many Stanley Cups were won and a lot of hockey took place. A lot of decent hockey, and I'm not a Red Wings fan. So, to say that really does mean something. But yeah, so that's the Joe that I missed last week and owed a good explanation. In 1980, excuse me, Howard Stern started broadcasting his radio show here on WWW in Detroit, Michigan. I couldn't figure out. I believe that he had started broadcasting other places. Like, I don't think this was the first place that he started broadcasting it. It was just one of the major markets that allowed it on kind of the traditional radio. So that had some kind of impact and some kind of benefit. So local Detroit radio. I know it's not everybody's favorite, but it was historic at the time. And that takes us to the speech. I haven't listened to the speech, so I was going to listen to it in its entirety. It's a little bit long, but to be honest, the 80s were a little light with history anyways, so it's okay. The fuck, not a Wings fan? No, I am a Colorado Avalanche fan. My idol and hero is Patrick Waugh, and I am a huge Avs fan. I think the Red Wings are the Yankees, basically. Anyways, now that we got that out of the way and AP now hates me, we'll move on. So Reagan's speech. So the Republican National Convention was held in 1980 in the greatest city, Detroit, Michigan. It took place right here, and Ronald Reagan was obviously nominated for president on the side of the GOP. And he gave a pretty decent and lengthy speech here in Detroit at the nominating convention. Well, we could have been friends. Don't worry, I get that a lot. It happens. We can all like different things and still get along. AP. Right? Stern wrote us down real healthy to toxic environment. Yeah, and Stern was kind of the first like gross shock comic, I guess. Again, not a fan of him, but obviously his show was well received and became historic. But he was he was not a great dude, that's for sure, and he's one hell of a hypocrite. But besides that, so we're gonna get into Reagan's speech at the July 17th, 1980. Reagan's acceptance speech at the RNC in Detroit, Michigan. So this video is courtesy of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library. And this is the election they won in a massive landslide. Massive landslide. So this was the speech, and this was the political climate environment around at that time. So we'll watch this through. I know it's a little long, but like I said, I wanted to watch it anyways. So
You're using up prime time. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. They're singing our song. Thank you very much. Thank you. You're singing our song. Well, the first thrill tonight was to find myself for the first time in a long time in a movie on prime time. But this, as you can imagine, is the second big thrill. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice President to be, this convention, my fellow citizens of this great nation, with a deep awareness of the responsibility conferred by your trust, I accept your nomination for the presidency of the United States. I do so with deep gratitude, and I think also I might interject on behalf of all of us, our thanks to Detroit and the people of Michigan and of this city for the warm hospitality that we've enjoyed. And I thank you for your wholehearted response to my recommendation regard to George Bush as the candidate for vice president. I'm very proud of our party tonight. This convention has shown to all America a party united with positive programs for solving the nation's problems. A party ready to build a new consensus with all those across the land who share a community of values embodied in these words: family, work, neighborhood, peace, and freedom. Now, I know that we've had a quarrel or two, but as only as to the method of attaining a goal. There was no argument here about the goal. As president, I will establish a liaison with the 50 governors to encourage them to eliminate, wherever it exists, discrimination against women. I will monitor federal laws
Hats
to
are
ensure
great.
their implementation and to add statutes if they are needed. More than anything else, I want my candidacy to unify our country, to renew the American spirit and sense of purpose. I want to carry our message to every American, regardless of party affiliation, who is a member of this community of shared values. Never before in our history have Americans been called upon to face three grave threats to our very existence, any one of which could destroy us. We face a disintegrating economy, a weakened defense, and an energy policy based on the sharing of scarcity. The major issue of this campaign is the direct political, personal, and moral responsibility of Democratic Party leadership in the White House and in the Congress for this unprecedented calamity which has befallen us. They tell us they've done the most that could humanly be done. They say that the United States has had its day in the sun, that our nation has passed its zenith. They expect you to tell your children that the American people no longer have the will to cope with their problems, that the future will be one of sacrifice and few opportunities. My fellow citizens, I utterly reject that view. The American people, the most generous on earth, who created the highest standard of living, are not going to accept the notion that we can only make a better world for others by moving backward ourselves. And those who believe we can have no business leading this nation. I will not stand by and watch this great country destroy itself under mediocre leadership that drifts from one crisis to the next, eroding our national will and purpose. We have come together here because the American people deserve better from those to whom they entrust our nation's highest offices. And we stand united. We stand united in our resolve to do something about it. We need a rebirth of the American tradition of leadership at every level of government and in private life as well. The United States of America is unique in world history because it has a genius for leaders, many leaders on many levels. But back in 1976, Mr. Carter said, "Trust me." And a lot of people did. And now many of those people are out of work. Many have seen their savings eaten away by inflation. Many others on fixed incomes, especially the elderly, have watched helplessly as the cruel tax of inflation wasted away their purchasing power. And today, a great many who trusted Mr. Carter wonder if we can survive the Carter policies of national defense. Trust
Kind of
me,
seems
government
similar to what's
asks
going on
that we
right now, doesn't it?
concentrate our hopes and dreams on one man, that we trust him to do what's best for us. Well, my view of government places trust not in one person or one party, but in those values that transcend persons and parties. The trust is where it belongs, in the people. The responsibility to live up to that trust is where it belongs, in their elected leaders. That kind of relationship between the people and their elected leaders is a special kind of compact. 360 years ago in 1620, a group of families dared to cross a mighty ocean to build a future for themselves in a new world. When they arrived at Plymouth, Massachusetts, they formed what they called a compact, an agreement among themselves to build a community and abide by its laws. This single act, the voluntary binding together of free people to live under the law, set the pattern for what was to come. A century and a half later, the descendants of those people pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to found this nation. Some forfeited their fortunes and their lives. None sacrificed honor. Fourscore and 7 years later, Abraham Lincoln called upon the people of all America to renew their dedication and their commitment to a government of, for, and by the people. Isn't it once again time to renew our compact of freedom? to pledge to each other all that is best in our lives, all that gives meaning to them for the sake of this, our beloved and blessed land. Together, let us make this a new beginning. Let us make a commitment to care for the needy, to teach our children the virtues handed down to us by our families, to have the courage to defend those values and virtues and the willingness to sacrifice for them. Let us pledge to restore in our time the American spirit of voluntary service, of cooperation, of private and community initiative, a spirit that flows like a deep and mighty river through the history of our nation. As your nominee, I pledge to you to restore to the federal government the capacity to do the people's work without dominating their lives. I pledge to you a government that will not only work well, but wisely. Its ability to act tempered by prudence, and its willingness to do good, balanced by the knowledge that government is never more dangerous than when our desire to have it help us blinds us to its great power to harm us. The first Republican president once said, "While the people retain their virtue and their vigilance, no administration by any extreme of wickedness or folly can seriously injure the government in the short space of 4 years." If Mr. Lincoln could see what's happened in the last 3.5 years, he might hedge a little on that statement.
Or, again, currently with Joe Biden.
But with the virtues that are our legacy as a free people, and with the vigilance that sustains liberty, we still have time to use our renewed compact to overcome the injuries that have been done to America these past 3.5 years. First, we must overcome something the present administration has cooked up, a new and altogether indigestible economic stew. One part inflation, one part high unemployment, one part recession, one part runaway taxes, one part deficit spending, seasoned with an energy crisis. It's an economic stew that has turned the national stomach. Ours are not problems of abstract economic theory. These are problems of flesh and blood, problems that cause pain and destroy the moral fiber of real people who should not suffer the further indignity of being told by the government that it is all somehow their fault. We do not have inflation because, as Mr. Carter says, we've lived too well. The head of a government which has utterly refused to live within its means and which has in the last few days told us that this coming year's deficit will be $60 billion, dares to point the finger of blame at business and labor, both of which have been engaged in a losing struggle, just trying to stay even. High taxes, we are told, are somehow good for us, as if when government spends our money, it isn't inflationary, but when we spend it, it is. Those who preside over the worst energy shortage in our history tell us to use less so that we'll run out of oil, gasoline, and natural gas a little more slowly. Well, now, conservation is desirable, of course, but we mustn't waste energy. But conservation is not the sole answer to our energy needs. America must get to work producing more energy. The Republican program for solving economic problems is based on growth and productivity. Large amounts of oil and natural gas lay beneath our land and off our shores untouched because the present administration seems to believe the American people would rather see
It
more
does seem really
regulation,
good. I mean,
more taxes, and more
I've never heard of
controls
it, or I
than
never
more
heard
energy.
it, so I was interested.
Coal
to watch.
offers a great potential. So does nuclear energy produced under rigorous safety standards. It could supply electricity for thousands of industry and millions of jobs and homes. It must not be thwarted by a tiny minority opposed to economic growth, which often finds friendly ears in regulatory agencies for its obstructionist campaigns. Now, make no mistake, we will not permit the safety of our people or our environmental heritage to be jeopardized. But we are going to reaffirm that the economic prosperity of our people is a fundamental part of our environment. Our problems are both acute and chronic. Yet all we hear from those in positions of leadership are the same tired proposals for more government tinkering, more meddling, and more control, all of which led us to this sorry state in the first place. Can anyone look at the record of this administration and say, well done? Can anyone compare the state of our economy when the Carter administration took office with where we are today and say, keep up the good work? Can anyone look at our reduced standing in the world today and say, let's have 4 more years of this? I believe the American people are going to answer these questions as you've answered them in the first week in November, and their answer will be, no, we've had enough. And then it will be up to us, beginning next January 20th, to offer an administration and congressional leadership of competence and more than a little courage. We must have the clarity of vision to see the difference between what is essential and what is merely desirable, and then the courage to bring our government back under control. It is essential. It is essential that we maintain both the forward momentum of economic growth and the strength of the safety net between those in our society who need help. We also believe it is essential that the integrity of all aspects of Social Security be preserved. Beyond these essentials, I believe it is clear our federal government is overgrown and overweight. Indeed, it is time our government should go on a diet. Therefore, my first act as chief executive will be to impose an immediate and thorough freeze on federal hiring. Then we're going to enlist the very best minds from business, labor, and whatever quarter to conduct a detailed review of every department, bureau, and agency that lives by federal appropriation. And we're going to enlist the help and ideas of many dedicated and hardworking government employees at all levels who want a more efficient government just as much as the rest of us do. I know that many of them are demoralized by the confusion and waste they confront in their work as a result of failed and failing policies. Our instructions to the groups we enlist will be simple and direct. We will remind them that government programs exist at the sufferance of the American taxpayer and are paid for with money earned by working men and women, and programs that represent a waste of their money, a theft from their pocketbooks, must have that waste eliminated or that program must go. It must go by executive order where possible, by congressional action where necessary. Everything that can be run more effectively by state and local government, we shall turn over to state and local government along with the funding sources to pay for it. We're going to put an end to the money merry-go-round where our money becomes Washington's money to be spent by states and cities exactly the way the federal bureaucrats tell us it has to be spent. I will not accept the excuse that the federal government has grown so big and powerful that it is beyond the control of any president, any administration, or Congress. We are going to put an end to the notion that the American taxpayer exists to fund the federal government. The federal government exists to serve the American people. On January 20th, we are going to reestablish that truth. Also on that date, we are going to initiate action to get substantial relief for our tax-paying citizens and action to put people back to work. None of this will be based on any new form of monetary tinkering or fiscal sleight of hand. We will simply apply to government the common sense that we all use in our daily lives. Work and family are at the center of our lives, the foundation of our dignity as a free people. When we deprive people of what they've earned or take away their jobs, we destroy their dignity and undermine their families. We can't support families unless there are jobs, and we can't have jobs unless the people have both money to invest and the faith to invest it. These are concepts that stem from an economic system that for more than 200 years has helped us master a continent, create a previously undreamed of prosperity for our people, and has fed millions of others around the globe. And that system will continue to serve us in the future if our government will stop ignoring the basic values on which it was built and stop betraying the trust and goodwill of the American workers who keep it going. The American people are carrying the heaviest peacetime tax burden in our nation's history, and it will grow even heavier under present law next January. We're taxing ourselves into economic exhaustion and stagnation, crushing our ability and incentive to save, invest, and produce. This must stop. We must halt this fiscal self-destruction and restore sanity to our economic system. I've long advocated a 30% reduction in income tax rates over a period of 3 years. This phased tax reduction This phased tax reduction would begin with a 10% down payment tax cut in 1981, which the Republicans in Congress and I have already proposed. A phased reduction of tax rates would go a long way toward easing the heavy burden on the American people, but we shouldn't stop there. Within the context of economic conditions and appropriate budget priorities, during each fiscal year of my presidency, I would strive to go further. This would include improvement in business depreciation taxes so we can stimulate investment in order to get plants and equipment replaced. Put more Americans back to work, and put our nation back on the road to being competitive in world commerce. We will also work to reduce the cost of government as a percentage of our gross national product. The first task of national leadership is to set realistic and honest priorities in our policies and our budget. And I pledge that my administration will do that. When I talk of tax cuts, I'm reminded that every major tax cut in this century has strengthened the economy, generated renewed productivity, and ended up yielding new revenues for the government by creating new investment, new jobs, and more commerce among our people. The present administration has been forced by us Republicans to play follow the leader with regard to a tax cut. But in this election year, we must take with the proverbial grain of salt any tax cut proposed by those who have already given us the greatest single tax increase in our nation's history. When those in leadership give us tax increases and tell us we must also do with less, have they thought about those who've always had less, especially the minorities? This is like telling them that just as they step on that first rung of the ladder of opportunity, the ladder is being pulled out from under them. That may be the Democratic leadership's message to the minorities, but it won't be our message. Ours will be, we have to move ahead, but we're not going to leave anyone behind. Thanks to the economic policies of the Democratic Party, millions of Americans find themselves out of work. Millions more have never even had a fair chance to learn new skills, hold a decent job, or secure for themselves and their families a share in the prosperity of this nation. It's time to put America back to work, to make our cities and towns resound with the confident voices of men and women of all races, nationalities, and faiths, bringing home to their families a paycheck they can cash for honest money. For those without skills, we'll find a way to help them get new skills. For those without job opportunities, we'll stimulate new opportunities, particularly in the inner cities where they live. For those who've abandoned hope, we'll restore hope and we'll welcome them into a great national crusade to make America great again. When we move from domestic affairs and cast our eyes abroad, we see an equally sorry chapter in the record of the present administration. A Soviet combat brigade trains in Cuba just 90 miles from our shores. A Soviet army of invasion occupies Afghanistan, further threatening our vital interests in the Middle East. America's defense strength is at its lowest ebb in a generation, while the Soviet Union is vastly outspending us in both strategic and conventional arms. Our European allies, looking nervously at the growing menace from the East, turn to us for leadership and fail to find it. And incredibly, more than 50, as you've been told from this platform so eloquently already, More than 50 of our fellow Americans have been held captive for over 8 years, 8 months, by a dictatorial foreign power that holds us up to ridicule before the world. Adversaries, large and small, test our will and seek to confound our resolve. But we are given weakness when we need strength, vacillation when the times demand firmness. The Carter administration lives in a world of make-believe, every day drawing up a response to that day's troubles, regardless of what happened yesterday and what will happen tomorrow. But you and I live in a real world where disasters are overtaking our nation without any real response from Washington. This is make-believe, self-deceit, and above all, transparent hypocrisy. For example, Mr. Carter says he supports the volunteer army, but he lets military pay and benefits slip so low that many of our enlisted personnel are actually eligible for food stamps. Re-enlistment rates drop. And just recently, after he fought all week against a proposed pay increase for our men and women in the military, he then helicoptered out to the carrier, the USS Nimitz, which was returning from long months of duty in the Indian Ocean, and told the crew of that ship that he advocated better pay for them and their comrades. Where does he really stand now that he's back on shore? Well, I'll tell you where I stand. I do not favor a peacetime draft or registration, but I do favor pay and benefit levels that will attract and keep highly motivated men and women in our volunteer forces. And back them up with an active reserve, trained and ready for instant call in case of emergency. You know, there may be a sailor at the helm of the ship of state, but the ship has no rudder. Critical decisions are made at times almost in comic fashion, but who can laugh? Who was not embarrassed when the administration handed a major propaganda victory in the United Nations to the enemies of Israel, our staunch Middle East ally for 3 decades, and then claimed that the American vote was a mistake, the result of a failure of communication between the president, his Secretary of State, and his UN ambassador? Who does not feel a growing sense of unease as our allies, facing repeated instances of an amateurish and confused administration, reluctantly conclude that America is unwilling or unable to fulfill its obligations as leader of the free world? Who does not feel rising alarm when the question in any discussion of foreign policy is no longer, should we do something, but do we have the capacity to do anything? The administration which has brought us to this state is seeking your endorsement for 4 more years of weakness, indecision, mediocrity, and incompetence. No American should vote until he or she has asked, is the United States stronger and more respected now than it was 3.5 years ago? Is the world safer, a safer place in which to live? It is the responsibility of the President of the United States in working for peace to ensure that the safety of our people cannot successfully be threatened by a hostile foreign power. As President, fulfilling that responsibility will be my #1 priority. We're not a warlike people, quite the opposite. We always seek to live in peace. We resort to force infrequently and with great reluctance, and only after we've determined that it's absolutely necessary. We are awed, and rightly so, by the forces of destruction at loose in the world in this nuclear era. But neither can we be naive or foolish. 4 times in my lifetime, America has gone to war, bleeding the lives of its young men into the sands of island beachheads, the fields of Europe, and the jungles and rice paddies of Asia. We know only too well that war comes not when the forces of freedom are strong. It is when they are weak that tyrants are tempted. We simply cannot learn these lessons the hard way again without risking our destruction. Of all
Take care, buddy.
Of all the objectives we seek, first and foremost is the establishment of lasting world peace. We must always stand ready to negotiate in good faith, ready to pursue any reasonable avenue that holds forth the promise of lessening tensions and furthering the prospects of peace. But let our friends and those who may wish us ill take note. The United States has an obligation to its citizens and to the people of the world never to let those who would destroy freedom dictate the future course of life on this planet. I would regard my election as proof that we have renewed our resolve to preserve world peace and freedom, that this nation will once again be strong enough to do that. Now, this evening marks the last step, save one, of a campaign that has taken Nancy and me from one end of this great nation to the other over many months and thousands of miles. There are those who question the way we choose a president, who say that our process imposes difficult and exhausting burdens on those who seek the office. I have not found it so. It's impossible to capture in words the splendor of this vast continent which God has granted as our portion of his creation. There are no words to express the extraordinary strength and character of this breed of people we call American. Everywhere we've met thousands of Democrats, independents, and Republicans from all economic conditions, all walks of life, bound together in that community of shared values of family, work, neighborhood, peace, and freedom. They're concerned, yes. They're not frightened. They're disturbed, but not dismayed. They are the kind of men and women Tom Paine had in mind when he wrote during the darkest days of the American Revolution, "We have it in our power to begin the world over again." Nearly 150 years after Tom Paine wrote those words, an American president told the generation of the Great Depression that it had a rendezvous with destiny. I believe this generation of Americans today also has a rendezvous with destiny. Tonight, let us dedicate ourselves to renewing the American Compact. I ask you not simply to trust me, but to trust your values, our values, and to hold me responsible for living up to them. I ask you to trust that American spirit, which knows no ethnic, religious, social, political, regional, or economic boundaries. the spirit that burned with zeal in the hearts of millions of immigrants from every corner of the earth who came here in search of freedom. Some say that spirit no longer exists, but I've seen it. I've felt it all across this land, in the big cities, the small towns, and in rural America. It's still there, ready to blaze into life if you and I are willing to do what has to be done. We have to do the practical things, the down-to-earth things, such as creating policies that will stimulate our economy, increase productivity, and put America back to work. The time is now to limit federal spending, to insist on a stable monetary reform, and to free ourselves from imported oil. The time is now to resolve that the basis of a firm and principled foreign policy is one that takes the world as it is and seeks to change it by leadership and example, not by harangue, harassment, or wishful thinking. The time now is now. The time is now to say that we shall seek new friendships and expand others and improve others, but we shall not do so by breaking our word or casting aside old friends and allies. And the time is now to redeem promises once made to the American people by another candidate in another time and another place. He said, "For 3 long years, I have been going up and down this country preaching that government, federal, state, and local, costs too much. I shall not stop that preaching. As an immediate program of action, we must abolish useless offices. We must eliminate unnecessary functions of government. We must consolidate subdivisions of government and, like the private citizen, give up luxuries which we can no longer afford." And then he said, "I propose to you, my friends, and through you, that government of all kinds, big and little, be made solvent, and that the example be set by the President of the United States and his cabinet." End of quote. That was Franklin Delano Roosevelt's words as he accepted the Democratic nomination for president in 1932. The time is now, my fellow Americans, to recapture our destiny, to take it into our own hands. And to do this, will take many of us working together. I ask you tonight, all over this land, to volunteer your help in this cause so that we can carry our message throughout the land. Isn't it time that we, the people, carry out those unkept promises that we pledged to each other and to all America on this July day, 48 years later, that now we intend to do just that? I have thought of something that's not a part of my speech and worried over whether I should do it. Can we doubt that only a divine providence placed this land, this island of freedom, here as a refuge for all those people in the world who yearn to breathe free? Jews and Christians enduring persecution behind the Iron Curtain, the boat people of Southeast Asia, of Cuba, and of Haiti, the victims of drought and famine in Africa, the freedom fighters in Afghanistan, and our own countrymen held in savage captivity. I'll confess that I've been a little afraid to suggest what I'm going to suggest. I'm more afraid not to. Can we begin our crusade, join together, in a moment of silent prayer. God bless America. Thank you.
So that was a good speech. Um, so this is the other one. So he obviously did really well. It's very similar to the rhetoric and the kind of information that we're hearing from another political candidate for office currently. So it's just interesting to see how history repeats, and I think he has a kind of a softer edge than the current one. Um, Probably a little bit more well liked than the current one ever will be, unfortunately. And yeah, I think he's a. I mean, some people have some good and bad things. I think history looks differently than present. Obviously, I wasn't alive during that time frame. So I don't know. I think he was. I think he's what we needed at the time, and we'll see what comes next. If we get what we need at this time, because I think we're in very similar situations. I mean, Carter to Biden is Trump to Reagan, and yeah. So that took place at Kobo, which we'll talk about later. Reagan was a beloved actor and governor before president. Yeah. And I don't think either, for the record, either Donald Trump or Ronald Reagan were these, staunch, stand up, right wing, ultra right conservative voices. I think they were probably more centrist and more middle of the road than anything else. So it's just interesting to see how they're both kind of billed as these right wing saviors, when I think they're more populist and more middle than anything else. So, but yeah, so that's the Republican National Convention in Detroit, Michigan. 1980, Detroit continues to shrink. So it has a total of 1,209,339 with the 1980 census. So we continue to shrink. We're down about 3 million or 300,000 from our previous check-in, which was 1970. So you're starting to see that shrink, and that will be consistent throughout. We'll continue to get shrinking and less people in the city. True. Very true. So then for my for the British people, because I don't think we take Grand Prix racing as serious as other countries do. But Detroit has Grand Prix, and Ben, it's kind of a neat event. It's an interesting event, and it's a different event. So there's the Detroit Grand Prix, eventually collectively referred to as the Chevrolet Detroit Grand Prix, because that's what it is now. Presented by Lear, because of course everything has to have a sponsor now. But the first Grand Prix was in 1982 and started as a Formula One race to the streets of downtown Detroit before becoming a kart sanctioned race in 1989. Don't know what any of that means. Again, I don't watch a ton of open wheel racing. I think it's exciting. I think it's fun to watch. But I do not watch a ton of it. So here is actual footage from the 1982 Detroit Grand Prix. It used to go downtown, then it moved out to, as we've talked about several times, it's moved out to Belle Isle, and then recently it's moved back to Detroit. So it's going to be in the city of Detroit now, for the time being. Blah blah blah. I think they should have kept it on Belle Isle, but they wanted to move it back downtown. So it redid the whole street, the whole section for that.
Multi-million-dollar business. Suppliers, advertisers, engineers, mechanics, and drivers determined to win and thus accumulate enough Grand Prix points to capture that coveted world championship.
Formula One motor racing these days is very much about the commercial
See,
aspect,
British person.
commercial exploitation. That is the presentation of somebody's name to the public through association with the sport.
You're the world championship winning team, and therefore you're able to approach potential sponsors with a better product.
At all 16 Formula One events, including Detroit, points are awarded to both teams and individual drivers for finishing in the top 6 spots. 9 points for a victory, ranging down to 1 point for coming in 6th.
What's more important, for you to win or the team to win?
Sure, I think it's two things we go together, because when I win, the team win.
I think from a driver's point of view, it's he's a bit greedy. It's more important that he does well, he wins races, he wins the world championship.
This is the entrance into the pit area where the greatest difference exists between Indy type and Grand Prix racing. Now on Sunday, drivers don't want to ever pull their cars in here. At Indy, cars need to refuel. This year, on his final pit stop, Rick Mears bumped Herm Johnson, lost precious time, and it probably cost him the race. But Grand Prix cars have enough gas to last all 181 miles, and that's just one difference
It's awesome.
between the two sports.
Indianapolis style racing or oval racing is a very specialized type of racing, and so is Grand Prix racing. The regulations are totally different. A Grand Prix car is specifically designed to negotiate a road course which has left and right hand corners, different length straights, and that's what it's designed for. The Indianapolis style car is designed to negotiate an oval at the highest possible speed.
All that's left to do is run the race.
That's so cool to see down
The
there.
international drivers found themselves practicing in the rain today, rains that were totally unexpected and rains that kept lap times down. It was overcast when the first cars hit the circuit this morning. A lot of fans were out there watching, but not the thousands race organizers had expected. And when the showers hit in the early afternoon, many fans sought shelter. Rensen was packed. Many people were still trying to buy tickets, though.
People have been asking us about the rain. What we've been telling them is that we are going to race, and rain or not.
Race officials never said how many tickets were sold, but a big paying crowd never materialized for today's practice session. The rains played a part, but most fans didn't mind.
It's cold out here.
You don't like the weather, huh?
A little rainy. We're partying.
But you having a good time anyhow?
Oh, yeah.
You want it to clear up, huh?
Tell your weatherman that we have one word for this. Get it right next time.
1980s when that was that good.
But wasn't outdoor concession business way off?
Nobody come down because the weather keep a lot of people out.
You hoping it'll be better tomorrow?
I hope the sun's shining. I'm freezing myself.
The race fans did get to see 100-mile-an-hour Super Bs on the Detroit circuit today, as well as some vintage racers whose lap times
Oh, that's
were
so
half
cool.
those of the Formula Ones. But race fans are a diehard group.
Too bad. If it wasn't for the weather, it'd be really great. Because I enjoy just being in the park, watching people walk by, being part of all the hoopla. I did this for Super Bowl too. Went down to the went down to the Renaissance and over to ACs, the whole bit.
So that was the Grand Prix. Oh, stop. All right. So that was the 1982 Grand Prix, and I don't know, just a cool event. It's kind of a random event. Probably should be here, given that Detroit is the Motor City. If we're being honest, probably should be plenty of racing here in Detroit. We have a NASCAR race out in, it's called Brooklyn, the Michigan International Speedway, which gets a lot of the automotive sponsors, but it's not as prestigious as the Grand Prix. So, but yeah, it's really cool to see the cars and see something different. So, also in 1984, often called the Boys of Summer, they still think so. That's for sure. It's still the Motor City. I mean, it's still the home of them. It's still where the UAW is headquartered. It's still, I mean, there's still a lot of automotive history here. So, but in 1984, the Detroit Tigers won the 84 World Series, defeating the San Diego Padres in 5 games. So this was the star-studded team that probably should have won more tournaments or titles than they actually did. The 1984 Tigers had Trammell, and it had God, I can't even think of half the players on the team, but just a ton of historically significant Tigers players. So it's a casket of history. It is a casket of history, but it still has the history for sure. So 1984, they won the World Series, our last World Series. 1985, Miss Black America, Amina Fakir, Detroit, was crowned the 18th Miss Black America. Again, racial tensions. There was a lot of racial issues going on here in the city, and it was a huge issue. So it was huge that there was, something going on there. um, for the African American community and the minority communities. So Miss Black America was huge, and a Detroiter won it in 1985. So 1985 as well. Michigan seatbelt law, mandatory seatbelt law, goes into effect. It is the third state in the nation to do so. And then later we got to click it or ticket, that kind of stuff. But seatbelts became mandatory in 1985. 1987, Pope John Paul II. And you can see all the different meanings and pronunciations, was the head of the Catholic Church and sovereign of the Vatican City from 1978 to his death in 2005. He did visit the city of Detroit. He visited the Pontiac Silverdome, and that was a incredibly lengthy video. It was like 4 hours for the mass and him visiting the Pontiac Silverdome, which is where the Lions played, which we showed in last week's episode. One of the largest stadiums in the NFL, and that's where the Pope visited Detroit. So we're gonna watch just a short one on the Pope. He kissed the Pope, did? Huh. So we'll watch a short about how he got here and why and all that good stuff.
Towering over Pope Park on the corner of Joseph Campbell and Belmont Streets in Hamtramck, Michigan, is a statue of Pope John Paul II. On October 26, 1982, the 6,000-pound, 10-foot-tall statue was erected to commemorate Karol Wojtyła, who eventually became the first Polish Pope of the Catholic Church. Pope John Paul II began his papacy in 1978. He was considered a national symbol for Poland since he was the first non-Italian pope. Pope John Paul II had natural ties with Hamtramck because of its strong Polish heritage, as well as the fact that his very own cousin, John E. Wojtyła, was a Hamtramck councilman in the 1940s and 1950s. Cardinal Sciocca of Detroit persistently requested and eventually acquired the Pope's visitation to Detroit. It was a great honor and privilege for the people of Southeast Michigan to host Pope John Paul II. He spent 2 days in Detroit visiting Sacred Heart Major Seminary and the Cathedral of the Most Blessed Sacrament. He also made addresses at Ford Auditorium and Hart Plaza, and celebrated Mass at the Pontiac Silverdome. Walter Obarzanek, a 96-year-old Polish man from Southeast Michigan, recalls his experience of seeing the Pope in 1987.
Oh, packed. And he was going to make a speech where they play football.
100,000 people came to see Pope John Paul II.
Well, I wanted to see him. Went with my car, and we couldn't park no place in Hamtramck.
As Walter was walking, the Pope actually passed Walter and gave him a blessing.
Statue or something or that. That's he came to see. The Pope came to see that.
Pope John Paul II has made a huge impact on Poland that has been carried over to the Polish Americans in Hamtramck and Detroit, which is why Pope Park and the statue of Pope John Paul II truly show an ethnic layer of Detroit.
shoot, I was muted for that whole rant. I apologize. I clicked the M button. So I'll start over. I apologize for that. So the people mover, the city of Detroit, obviously with the big three automotive, did not want a mass transit system. As it kind of spread out and as it got a little bit further away from being so manufacturing heavy, obviously they wanted people buying cars. But as that kind of started to wane a little bit and go away, they started to install mass transit. So the people mover was supposed to be that mass transit system. So it went to a couple different places. The casino, of course. It went to Campus Martius, Grand Circus Park. It went to, trying to think of where else it went to, the Joe Louis Arena, Cobo Hall. But that was really it. And there was all these plans for expansion. And it was supposed to be great and blah, blah, blah. And other than kind of a novelty, go for a ride and see the riverfront, there's not a whole lot of utility or benefit to it, especially since some of the places like the Joe are now gone. So basically it was a ride to Joe Louis Arena to watch a hockey game. And that's that was its major utility for the longest time. And it was good for that. It truly was. It was a benefit to that. But it's beyond that, there wasn't a whole lot to it. I think I've taken more rides for just that, for recreation, just to see the city, or take pictures of the riverfront, or Cobo Hall. You can still get to Cobo on it, so I guess that's a benefit. But that's really about it. It's really about it. So I knew what you meant. So we're going to take a ride on the Detroit People Mover. This is a ride around the entire track. The entire track takes 16 minutes to go around the entire outside of it. Also during COOF, they stopped using it for the longest time. I couldn't tell you if it's back up or not. Because again, there's not a hell of a lot of benefit to it. But we'll take a ride around the People Mover. It is an elevated monorail to the city. So financial district. It looks like that's what it actually sounds like on a good day. It sounds like hell. Used a lot going to Wayne State. Yeah, I could see that.
This is the Broadway station.
Oh, this is Broadway. Okay. So you can see off to the right the Detroit Opera House. That's that brick building. We've talked about that in previous episodes.
The next station is Grand Circus Park.
Grand Circus Park. I think that's where they're actually holding the NFL draft. I haven't actually looked at it. This is relatively recent with some of the new traffic and or new buildings and stuff. Yep, sounds the same. Clickety clacky with the thing that sounds like it's on its last thing.
The next station is Times Square.
Times Square station is the next station. It's good to see the downtown like heart of Detroit. Like I think that's one of the benefits to the mover. It's a quick, easy way to see all of what Detroit has to offer.
This is the Times Square station.
So you can see off to the right is all the bus routes and all that kind of stuff. Or all the bus loading. You need like a transfer bus, a city bus, or whatever. You go to Times Square.
The next station
See Comerica Bank.
This is the Michigan Avenue station.
Michigan Ave, which is US 12, runs all the way to Chicago.
The next station is
Is that Cadillac? I couldn't tell.
this is the Huntington Place.
This is Cobo Hall. This is inside Cobo. So this is where the auto show is, all that kind of stuff. It actually goes into the Cobo Hall building. And off to the left, you go to Cobo with Huntington Center.
The next station is West Riverfront.
You go right through Cobo Hall, out to the other side. Yep, that's where you get off for the auto show or any other event. Joe Louis used to be to your right. If you see any of those silver tubes off to your right. Interesting side note, one of my favorite movies, Deadpool. Go back and watch the original Deadpool, the opening scene. It is filmed on this road right here, which is Jefferson. And this road. One of these roads, because you see the tubes in the background. I'm all mixed up. But the Deadpool intro, the original Deadpool movie intro, was filmed down Jefferson. And you'll be able to see these tubes, and you'll be able to see that these tubes are in the background of the Deadpool intro. So.
This is the West Riverfront Station.
And that's the Detroit River. Off to the right is Canada, the lovely Canada.
The next station is Financial District.
It's fun, and it's free now if they still have it open. That's the Detroit Princess. That's a riverboat that they do meals and stuff on. So, no, like I said, the last couple times, I don't think it's been open at all.
This is the Financial District Station.
So now we're like on the other side, Financial District Station. So we're coming back around. It's one big giant loop. Yeah, sure.
The next station is Military Center.
Going through another building. You can see off to the right the Renaissance Center, a building we talked about last week.
Military Center Station.
I think there's only like 2 other stops, but I mean, it moves fairly quickly as well. So there's a few, like 7 altogether. That's the casino right there. That oh, it's not gonna let me. That building is a casino, one of 3. There's MGM Grand, Motor City Casino, and Greektown Casino. Bricktown Station.
This is the Bricktown Station.
I mean, and when they used to have like a baseball game and then a Red Wings game and some other event, like the auto show always has a ton of traffic. But other than that, no, it's just not used that much. No, they are not Indian casinos. So this is the Greektown station. So on your right is the Greektown Casino. You take this bridge, this little bridge into Greektown. It's actually a pretty cool casino because it's all in the like they built in the alleyways and stuff. So it's a neat casino to go into.
Bricktown Station.
Yeah, we should have one more stop. And then we're right back down to where we started again. So that is the entire loop. That is the beautiful city of Detroit. That is the downtown loop of the city of Detroit. And that is our massive people mover monorail. Like it's been said, it used to be much more popular. It's a driverless autonomous vehicle since its opening. And I don't know. It's gone. It's fallen out of favor, but it's been it did serve its purpose at one point. So we're actually going to skip ahead, and then we're going to come back. 1987, Michigan celebrates its sesquicentennial, that word, of its statehood. So 150 years of its statehood. So, yep, I'm still streaming. So 150 years, state of Michigan celebrated its statehood, and I can't Yep, I said it. 1988, Stevie Wonder announces he will run for mayor of Detroit in 1992. He said he was going to run for mayor in 1992. That would have been after the Coleman A. Young days. He decided not to, and ultimately kind of went away from that duty. So, what would a Mayor Wonder would have been? It would have been kind of neat. So, but he took it very, very seriously and was seriously considering running for mayor of the city of Detroit. In that 1992 after Young's term was up. Also in 1988, the Palace of Auburn Hills, commonly known as the Palace, was a multi-purpose arena located in Auburn Hills, Michigan. So we're talking a little bit north. It was opened in 1988. It was home to the Detroit Pistons of the NBA, the Detroit Shock of the WNBA, the Detroit Vipers of the International Hockey League, Detroit Rockers of the National Professional Soccer League, the Detroit Neon, Detroit Safari Continental Indoor Soccer League, the Detroit Fury of the Arena Football League. So it was always kind of like the little brother of Detroit sports stadiums. It was a pretty building. It was, again, not a whole lot to it. It was kind of up by the Silver Dome. Not a hell of a lot to it, but it served its purpose. Stairs were kind of steep in the cheap seats up top, but other than that, it was neat. Probably most famous for the Malice at the Palace, which is where Ron Artest punched somebody, and there was a fight between the Pistons and the Indiana Pacers. So yeah, it does. You mean the ski hill? The landfill ski hill? Also in 1988, we got the Bel Air Cinema. So the Bel Air Cinema is a drive-in. It was a Trin drive-in theater. It still exists down there, although not in the same kind of state that it once was. Kind of a relic of the past, but pretty neat nonetheless. I found this commercial for the Bel Air because they hosted other events during the day, such as flea markets. And I found this historic ad from 1980s, and I just couldn't. It would hurt if I didn't play it. So.
It's me, the Chief Flea, with some flea advice for anybody that ain't anything to sell. Bring us to the flea market at the Bel Air Drive-In Theater every weekend from 8 to 4. Just a few dollars will lease a display space where you can attract thousands of interested shoppers. Be your own dealer and sell everything from paperbacks to Pontiacs. Admission and parking are free to shoppers at the open-air flea market every Saturday and Sunday, 8 to 4 on 8 miles just east of Van Dyke. Call 358-1928 for leasing information.
Aren't you just happy that you have that in your in your life right now? Because why wouldn't you want that in your life right now? I mean, seriously, like that. That's the kind of commercials that you used to get. That's the kind of stuff your ad dollars used to get you back in the day. So, I I don't know. I think it's kind of cool. It's kind of neat to see what the old commercials look like. But yeah, it was a. Oh, I clicked on it. It was a pretty cool drive-in. Still is. It's still fun to go down in that general vicinity. It's not too terrible. But yeah, so there's the Bel Air. Yeah, we'll do this one next, and then also in 1988, Michigan, we went through a whole section of naming rocks and trees and all kinds of stuff. We named our state fish in 1988. The brook trout becomes the official fish of the state of Michigan. So, brook trout, they're fun to catch. Caught some up north at my cabin. And so now we're going to head back. We're going to head back to 1987, 1 year back, and then finish up with the most important event of the 1980s. This was nuts. So in 1987, August 16th, a McConnell Douglas MD-82 operating as Northwest Airlines Flight 255 crashed shortly after takeoff from DTW about 8:46 p.m. Eastern, resulting in the deaths of all 6 crew members and 148 of the 149 passengers, along with 2 people on the ground. The sole survivor was a 4-year-old girl who sustained serious injuries and is still alive. So everybody else on the plane died except for this little girl, 4-year-old. So this was big. This was our last major air incident here at Detroit. And this is coverage from the news from when it happened. To see some of the damage down on 75 was pretty nuts. 275, I think. Doesn't say. Oh, it doesn't say, but I think it was 275, but I'm sure we'll see. But hey, Jude. This is from, I believe this is from NBC. So there we go. So it shortly after takeoff, and it really did just scatter down the entire freeway, close the entire freeway. It was one hell of a mess for quite some time. So you can see portions of the plane just still on the road there. It basically ripped apart and like I said, killed all but one passenger, which was a small child.
Rick Schneider reports via satellite from News 4's Washington Bureau on how the investigation of the crash is being handled there. The black box flight recorder has arrived for study.
The crash of Flight 255 has touched the world of sports, as a member of the Phoenix Suns pro basketball team is reported among the victims.
And Paul Long reports on the McDonnell Douglas MD-80, the jetliner that was Northwest Flight 255.
So Northwest Airlines used to be a hub. It used to be a Detroit hub. It turned into a Delta hub.
As News 4 weather radar recorded, there were thunderheads in the area when Flight 255 went down, producing shifting, gusty winds. A small twin-engine plane that landed 15 minutes before the crash reported moderate turbulence. Employees at Butler Aviation put extra chocks under the wheels of its planes because of the winds. If Flight 255 encountered a sudden, dramatic shift in the wind just after it left the ground, it could have caused the plane to stall.
And I mean, it was a medium-sized aircraft, so it wasn't huge.
Rate of climb will decrease and perhaps even become negative. And if it becomes
Yeah, someone did keep the little safe, for sure.
Airplanes land and take off into the
Talk
wind,
about the
as
survivor's
much air
guilt
as
of
possible under the wing for lift.
everyone
Wind
else.
shears and downbursts destroy that
154
lift. They have
others
been the cause of a number of fatal crashes.
lost their lives.
In 1982, a Pan Am 727 crashed just after takeoff during a thunderstorm. But you don't have to be in a thunderstorm to encounter it.
Even with the most sophisticated ground detection equipment, it takes time to detect, to analyze what is happening, and then to transmit that information to the pilot, who obviously needs it the most.
The stall can also explain why witnesses saw flames coming from one of the engines. In this NASA test, air going through the engine was sharply decreased, causing a burst of flame. A commercial pilot told News 4 that he saw flames coming out both engines
Flame
just
out.
before the crash.
So I think this is just kind of a collection of reporting. So we'll get like 1 or 2 more days.
Closed doors to talk about all aspects of the investigation, including the contents of 255's flight data recorder. A readout of the so-called black box gave the NTSB new clues, including a critical readout on wing flap position.
We have the evidence, the information based on the preliminary readout of the digital flight data recorder tape is that those were in the zero or retracted position.
Wing flaps and slats are normally extended on takeoff to give the aircraft more lift. Slats in front and flaps on the backside of the wing may not be extended depending on flying conditions and load factors. Dr. Lauber was asked, is zero extension unusual?
Yes, it would be unusual. It is, we understand at this point that a zero flap takeoff is a permissible configuration in this aircraft. Whether or not that's true under the circumstances that exist here is subject to further investigation.
Lauber says the information from the flight data recorder can be confirmed with further investigation of physical evidence, including indicator lights that would have warned about the flap's position.
Yeah, Northwest took a huge stock hit for it, a huge
at this point
became a huge issue for the airline, but it appears that it was just not enough airflow coming over the wing to lift the plane.
During the takeoff sequence, and if
Climb a little bit too steep.
That flaps or slats are not in the proper position sounds a warning. Our preliminary review of the cockpit voice recorder doesn't reveal that there's any indication that there was a takeoff warning on that cockpit voice recorder. So again, we have a discrepancy that has to be resolved.
All right, so they just continue to talk about it more in depth as we go on, but that's kind of the gist of the situation. Incredibly unfortunate for obviously everybody who lost their lives, but the last major air incident that we've had in Detroit. So what is that, 37 years ago now? So not bad. No flaps, but it was kind of a weird situation with that storm. So probably the most influential event in Detroit in the 1980s. Mighty Meat was Detroit gives America its greatest ever American myself in the year of 1988. I was born here in this lovely city. So that takes us, yeah. It's obviously the most important event of the entire 1980s. So, but yeah. So that takes us through 1988. So 89 into the 90s next week, and I know, such a modest man, right? And then so we'll get into the 1990s next week, and some interesting goings on that happened there. For all those who are interested as well, while we're finishing up here, we'll go back. Yeah, we'll we did the 70s, but I missed a couple things that we have to catch up on. So, I missed a couple things throughout some of the decades that I'll have to put together for like a what I missed show. But there's 90s next week, and we'll continue pushing on with that. Tomorrow morning, the Starship flight test from Brownsville, Texas, or Boca Chica, Texas, South Texas, will be taking place. So keep an eye out for that. That begins at 7 a.m. Central Time, which I don't know what that means in Eastern Time, but I'll figure it out eventually. So that's exciting. But we hope it goes. There's a 110-minute launch window that opens up at 7 a.m. Central Time. So that will be fun for the morning. But until then, that's going to be it for me this evening. Thank you so much for... Wait, what? So, yeah. So we'll continue down this path. But that's going to be it for tonight. Hope everyone has a wonderful evening. Please hit that like button on the way out. And thanks for watching. As always, have a good night, y'all. Take care.